I was talking to a friend this week about a conflict that they were having with a family member. And then they said it. Being a Christian is hard sometimes. And they said that because the conflict with their family member was making them want to do and say some very not Christian-like things. Has anyone else experienced that before? Yes, and amen. One of the pastors that I learn a lot from is named Andy Stanley. He's down in Georgia, and he tells about a time when he was in counseling with his father, and they were just stuck. And I love the way that he tells it because it's just so relatable. He said that my dad saw things his way, and I saw things the right way. And he couldn't figure out why they weren't getting anywhere or making any progress. Dad, if you just saw things my way, we would be on our way. And you might be laughing right now because you might be thinking, finally, someone who is making sense, who understands me. Yes, because isn't it true that whenever we're in conflict with someone else, if they would just see things your way, it would make everything better. It would make everything okay. And so that's why for the next few weeks, we're going to be addressing a question that I know many of you have been asking in your life. What is wrong with all these people? Right? That is a question I ask myself on the daily basis. What is wrong with these people? And so we're starting a new message series entitled, How to Get People to See Things Your Way. This is the relationship series we've been talking about, and it's very important. And I promise that it's going to be a super practical series. And you can use these methods with anyone. No joke. If you've got a high school student in your life and you need to convince them that earth science is worth their effort even when they hate it, you can use these tools to show them that if they get a better grade in earth science, then they will be able to get into a better college. And if they get into a better college, then they'll be able to get a better job. And if they get a better job, they'll make more money. If they make more money, they can take better care of you when you're old. Right? This is an important thing to teach people. You can use these tools that we'll talk about in our series to talk to your mom or maybe your mother-in-law to convince them to stop walking around your house silently judging everything they see. And that's going to help your relationship because then you can invite them over more often without all the passive-aggressive comments. And as we'll see in the series, in order to get someone to see things your way, or better yet, in order to get them to apologize for being wrong, I know, finally, we're talking about something practical. I know, it's really good. You have to master relationship management because we all know that people need to be managed. And so I was really appreciative when I found that Pastor Andy Stanley has developed what he calls the C4 approach to relationship management. And no, it's just a coincidence. It's not talking about C4, the explosive. This is a different C4. This is a very helpful C4. The C4 approach to relationship management, yet the thing you have to know about this is this doesn't bring people together because that would require compromise and all that kind of stuff. No, this method brings people towards you and towards your way of thinking. And if it's done right, the other person won't even know that you're doing it to them. And so to introduce you to the C4 approach, we have to learn the 4 C's. Convince, convict, coerce, and control. Can you guys say that with me? Convince, convict, coerce, control. These are very important C's. And some of you, I don't think you were actually doing it with me. You might be laughing right now. You might think that I'm not being serious, but to tell you, just how effective these 4 C's are, can't you see how helpful this has been in bringing our nation together? And so that's why we are using these 4 C tools to help us learn how to manage other people. And so the way to manage other people and get them to follow your way of thinking is to convince, convict, coerce, and control them. But word of warning, you got to be careful not to share this with anyone, okay? We might have to talk about the live stream later, okay? Because here's the problem. The problem with other people is that they think you're the problem. And if they learn these very helpful tools, they might use them on you. And you might be finding yourself being changed towards their view because we can see just how effective these tools are. This is the way forward, right? Wrong. Clearly, obviously, I'm joking. Because these methods don't work on you. They don't work on me. They don't work on anyone else. But for some reason, we still start reaching for these 4 C's first before anything else when we're in a conflict with someone. And they usually make things worse. They don't heal anything. They don't help us grow or become better versions of ourselves. And even when you're in a conflict and you're trying to be diplomatic with someone, you might say something like, I don't know if you've ever heard this, "I'm sorry if I offended you." And we think that we're actually being diplomatic, but truly this is a very controlling statement, because the translation of this is, "You're too easily offended, because what I said most people wouldn't be offended by." Or maybe you've heard someone say, "I said I'm sorry. Why are you still upset?" Many husbands have probably said that before, and their wives right now are elbowing them. Why are you still upset? Well, we know that that's actually convicting language or coercing language, because in reality, what they meant to say was, I've done my part. You should be fine now. And since you're not fine, the problem is probably you. And even though we know that these 4 C's don't work, we keep reaching for them. Meanwhile, the others around us can see that the relationship is broken. In fact, the other people around us have a pretty good view for the actual thing that started the conflict in the first place. I don't know how many of you, when you were growing up, had an estranged uncle or a cousin, someone in the family that you know you're related to. You just didn't see them all that often because something happened. And then when you find out what actually happened to cause the conflict way back ago, to cause the separation a long time ago, you hear what actually happened, and then you look at your parents or whoever told you, and you go, wait, that's it? That's silly. Just call him. Just talk to her. But instead, the people who are in the conflict choose to keep up the holiday avoidance dance. You know, the one where every time it comes around Thanksgiving or Christmas, you call ahead and say, hey, what time are they showing up? Oh, how long are they staying? Oh, yeah, I don't think we're going to be able to see them. We can't stay that long. It's just the schedules, we don't want to impose on you. And it's just, bummer. We haven't gotten the schedules to line up for the 17th year in a row. So weird, yeah. And even when you're at an event where you can't avoid the other person because the timing is like that, it's a graduation or it's a wedding or something, those people have the skills to still practice sight avoidance. And it's incredible. It's really impressive, actually, to see how 2 groups of people can be at the same event for hours and somehow I didn't see them there. Oh, yeah, no, I didn't see you. Oh, so sorry. Until some tragedy happens. And then you're both at the hospital, or you're both at the funeral. And it's a highly emotional environment. And in the face of all that tragedy, the mountain of conflict seems smaller and smaller and smaller. And it's in those moments that the people usually do and say what they should have done and said a long time ago. And so that's why today we're actually starting a message series entitled Reassembly Required, a beginner's guide to repairing broken relationships. Because all of us have relationships in our life that we wish were better, that we wish we could fix or heal. And if we don't learn how to fix or heal these relationships, we're going to end up missing out on years of relationship that could be happening now. And we don't want to wait until tragedy occurs to cause us to come back together. And you might be wondering, why are we talking about this in church anyways? Like, what does this have to do with church? And truly, the answer is that I have run out of topics and I'm just reaching for the bottom of the barrel, trying to get you to pay attention to something. And obviously, I'm kidding. No, here at New Life, we're talking about this because we want to be apprentices of Jesus. We don't just want to be attenders of a church. We want to actually become apprentices of Jesus, learning how to live the way of Jesus so that we could become transformed by him in the way that we think, in the way that we feel, and in the way that we act. And so, as followers of Jesus, the bad news for you is we don't have a choice, actually, of whether or not to work towards healing relationships. The main passage that we're going to be looking at today is in Romans chapter 12. And so I want to invite you to open up your Bible. So Romans chapter 12. And if you want to use the black seatback Bible in front of you, I think it's on page 124 in the New Testament. And so you flip through past the Old Testament, you get to New Testament, and then page 124, you'll see Romans chapter 12. And this is the very famous chapter that starts with the very famous statement about presenting ourselves as a living sacrifice, because that's our way of worshiping God in response to the mercy that he has shown us. And this passage encourages us not to be conformed, not to be changed, not to be bent by the way of the world around us, but to allow God to transform us to become more like Jesus. And then it tells us what this looks like. So let's read together from Romans chapter 12, starting in verse 9. Here we go. Starting in verse 9, it says, "Let love be genuine. Hate what is evil. Hold fast to what is good. Love one another with mutual affection. Outdo one another in showing honor. Do not lag in zeal. Be ardent in spirit. Serve the Lord. Rejoice in hope." This is verse 12. "Be patient in suffering. Persevere in prayer. Contribute to the needs of the saints. Extend hospitality to strangers. Bless those who persecute you. Bless and do not curse them. Rejoice with those who rejoice. Weep with those who weep. Live in harmony with one another. Do not be haughty, but associate with the lowly. Do not claim to be wiser than you are. Do not repay anyone evil for evil, but take thought for what is noble in the sight of all. If it is possible, so far as it depends on you, live peaceably with all." This is the word of the Lord. Thanks be to God. Now our passage starts, the one that we read in verse 9, it starts because of God's mercy, because what he's already shown us. Let's worship him and let him transform us. And so our passage starts, so we're called to love. We're called to love, not in a fickle way, not in a fake way, not just when we're on good terms with someone else. We're encouraged to let love be genuine, without pretense. Literally, the word for genuine means let love be without play acting. Don't fake your loving behavior and cling to what is good. And then he continues, he says, love one another with mutual affection. Outdo one another. Lead the way in showing honor. Don't hesitate with enthusiasm, but be ardent, be stirred up in your spirit so that you can serve the Lord, so that you can be subject to the Lord. And just know, it sounds like, it's a long list of things, but I don't want you to hear this. This isn't a section of do this because you're supposed to or else. Remember how our section started. Because of God's mercy, God has already pressed in towards you. God has already made a way for you to experience healing and hope and joy and growth. So, based on that, here's how you get to respond. Love one another, serve the Lord, and then he continues saying, rejoice in hope, be glad in hope. Hold your ground in suffering. Be devoted to prayer. Keep yourself busily engaged with prayer, because if God has already made the way to come towards you, and now he's beckoning you to follow him so that you can heal and grow and experience joy in following his way of life, you'd think that you would hold on to him through everything that comes. Because following God doesn't mean life gets easy. It just means that life isn't lonely anymore. It means that when you have hope, you can be glad in it because God is with you. And when you experience tough times, when you experience suffering, you can hold on to God to get through it. When you experience anything in life, you've got a direct line to the creator of the universe through prayer. So you don't need to try and survive alone. And when you realize that you've got God who you can depend on, it allows you to live differently. So he says, so give to the needs of the saints, give to the needs of the servants of God, and pursue hospitality to strangers. Look for ways to bless people you don't even know. And you ask, well, how do I pursue hospitality? Well, verses 14 through 16 actually give us examples. It says, bless others even when they curse you. Rejoice with those who rejoice. Weep with those who weep. In other words, practicing hospitality just means stepping into the space, stepping into the experience of someone else, and just being with them there in that experience. Step towards them. And you don't have to be haughty, you don't have to be arrogant, you don't have to be a social climber just to get ahead, because you've already been adopted into the family of God. So who else do you need to get ahead of? Instead, associate with the lowly. Be accommodating to people who are in more modest situations with you. Maybe it even means simplify your life so that you rub elbows with people who think they're alone at the bottom. Because you used to be there. You felt it before. And God stepped down into your situation and didn't leave you alone there. And he's in the process of healing you and helping you grow so you can do the same for others. And then Paul says, don't repay evil with evil. And it's just a statement of fact that life isn't roses all of a sudden when we start following Jesus. There will still be awful things that you face. There will still be evil situations that you need to overcome with God's help. But because you have God's help, you don't need to get back at anyone. It's not needed anymore because of God at work in your life. And so instead, choose the good ways to react, the beautiful ways to react. Choose the response that makes others stop and go, wow, that's different. There's something of goodness with that. And in all these things, Paul reminds us, remember that you can't control other people, right? We already talked that convincing and convicting and coercing, controlling, it doesn't work. So he says, so as far as it depends on you, as much as you are able to decide your own actions, your own responses, live at peace with those around you. In fact, make peace with those around you. Choose to act in the way of Jesus because of how Jesus has acted towards you. And what I don't want you to come away from this passage, and I've already mentioned it once, but I don't want you to come away from this thinking that we just went through a whole long list of burdensome jobs that now you have to do, right? Being a follower of Jesus isn't about, well, you'd better act differently now, because that's too hard. I'm not strong enough. Remember what my friend said at the beginning, being a Christian is hard. But the good news is that it's not up to us on our own. Living like Jesus isn't something that we try and muscle through with our own power. It's not something that we try to exert more effort with. It's not something that we'd better do, and if we can't do it, then you'd better pretend. Paul writes a different letter to another group of Christians in 2 Corinthians, and I want to put this passage on the screen because the beginning of this passage is actually the theme verse for our whole church. It says, anyone who belongs to Christ has become a new person. The old is gone, the new life has begun. And that means that even when you feel like you haven't changed much, being claimed by Jesus means that you're actually able to start to act differently now. And then he continues, in the next verse, Paul says, this is all a gift. It's not something that we earn. God has done all the hard work. God has reconciled us to him. And now God is inviting us into the work of reconciling others. And now we get to be God's ambassadors. We get to be his messengers. We get to tell others the fact that God wants to heal them too. And it's a gift because Jesus took the payment for our guilt. All the ways that we have and all the ways that we will continue to mess up, Jesus paid it in full so that we could learn how to live the way that God created us for in the first place. And the good news of God is that forgiveness isn't the whole story. Forgiveness is only half of the equation. And we know this in our relationships too, because we can forgive someone without that actually changing anything between us, right? That's because forgiveness is easier than reconciling. We can choose to forgive someone without ever even attempting to reconcile with them, because when we forgive, we actually hold all the cards. We hold all the control. Well, I'm going to be a bigger person, and I'm going to forgive them in my heart. But no, I'm not going to give in to their demands. I'm not going to run after them right now. reconciliation is harder because we have to give up something in order to move towards someone else. We have to be willing to submit. It takes vulnerability, and that's hard. That can feel too hard when we try and rely on our own power. But the good news is that God wasn't content to merely forgive you. God's forgiveness that took all the guilt of our sin isn't the end. It was a means to the end. God's forgiveness removed the obstacle that was standing in the way of your relationship with him. It removed guilt. It removed sin. God's forgiveness took care of that blockage between you and him, but he wasn't done yet. He didn't just turn us loose after forgiving us. Once that obstacle was taken care of, God kept going to repair our relationship with him. And God came to us in the person of Jesus to take away the penalty of our sin so that we could be made right with God. And so if we want to learn the proven path for repairing our relationships with others, we got to follow Jesus' way for it, because he's already cleared the obstacle through forgiveness. And he's already kept going to reassemble our relationship with God. And so on the basis of God's mercy, because he's already done that for us, we now get to begin that process with others. And sure, it's hard, but we don't do it alone. And so the first step to repairing a broken relationship is to fix what isn't working. We already talked about this, but it doesn't work to convince others to see our side. It doesn't work to convict others of how they've messed up too. It doesn't work to coerce others and try and manipulate them. It doesn't work to try and control the way someone else reacts or responds or thinks. The first step to fix a broken relationship is to fix the way that we try to do those things. The first step is to stop trying to do those things. The first step to fixing a broken relationship is to allow God to work in our hearts to fix us. Because when I have a broken relationship, the way that I act, the way that I try to fix them, it isn't working. I'm what's not working. But God has reached out to me. God has given me mercy and forgiveness. God has begun to work in my heart to begin the process of healing. And God has committed to keep going with me in this journey so that I can continue to grow and heal and be transformed to become more and more like Jesus in how I think, in how I feel, and in how I act. And this can be a long process sometimes, but God never gives up. And because I didn't earn that, because it's a gift, because he keeps showing me love and grace, well, that makes it more possible for me to share that love and grace with others. Even the others who have hurt me. Even the others who have broken trust with me. It's a process. But the first step is to fix what isn't working, to allow God to work in my heart. Jesus talks about this when he says, don't try to take out the speck in someone else's eye until you've taken out the plank in your own eye. And we always think, oh, this is about hypocrisy. But if you keep reading that passage, he says, take out the plank in your eye so that you can see better to help the other person with the speck in their eye. There's no way I can work and reconciling with anyone else until I allow God to work in my heart first. And then I can take that step towards reconciling with others, because that's the mission that we're actually called into as the family of God. We get to work towards forgiveness and healed relationships because God has started that work with us. We get to share love and forgiveness with people who don't deserve it, even people that we don't know very well, because God has done all the work of bringing us back to himself in Jesus. We get to show the world how brokenness isn't forever, because we follow the one who can heal and repair and restore anything. And so I want to encourage you today, depending on what God is making stand out to you, what he seems to be saying to you, I want to encourage you to say yes to God today. Let's take that step in allowing God to reconcile to us. Whether you've never done that before, whether you're just starting, to receive God's love. Whether you've been following Jesus your whole life, God is reaching out to you today. He's still reaching out to you. So let's receive God's grace again today. Let's give up trying to control everything around us. Let's choose to share forgiveness and the willingness to reconcile because of what God has done and is continuing to do through Jesus at work in our lives. Isn't that good news? Amen.